Okay, let us begin our class today. Good morning, everyone. So, the course that we are going to study in this semester is Theravada Abhidhamma, right? So, as far as I remember, some of you have studied this Pali literature, right? And in that, because of this focus in the course description, primarily the focus was Theravada Abhidhamma literature, right? So we have studied this course. So I think some of you are somehow familiar with this set of literature, Theravada Abhidhamma, right? Even if you do not study in detail, as a student of Buddhism, as a student of Buddhist studies, you are supposed to have a kind of an understanding of what is Theravada Abhidhamma or Abhidhamma in general, okay? Because you should be familiar with this Tipitaka. When you talk about Tipitaka, you have Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka, right? Do you remember how many texts in the Abhidhamma Pitaka? 7 texts, right? But the general idea is that this Abhidhamma Pitaka developed a bit later, right? So therefore, there are a lot of, reasoning and discussion why this came to be, how this came to be, and what are the central topics of discussion in this Abhidhamma literature, right? So since we are going to focus on this Theravada Abhidhamma specifically, this time we will be discussing the subject matter that are discussed in this collection of text, right? So it would be a kind of, how do you say, survey of this field, Theravada Abhidhamma. So we are not going to discuss so much about the literature because we have done it earlier, right? So you know about this text, and then I think, as far as I remember, we have gone through in a slightly detailed way of looking at the contents, right? And not so much discussion on the doctrines, right? Yeah, so this time we are going to focus on the doctrinal aspects mostly. But before starting today's lecture, let us discuss something very basic. First of all, let us look at the course outline. So I think I need to share the screen. So this is course outline. Yes. Now, if you look at the course description, what you see here is, I hope all of you can see this course outline, right? Even the online students, because I'm sharing this screen. The prime focus of the course will be on the Dhamma Theory, the cornerstone of the Abhidhamma philosophy. So there will be some discussion on the Dhamma Theory. It is very important to understand this Dharma, because normally when we talk about Dhamma, very quickly what comes to our mind is teaching of the Buddha, doctrine, right? But Dhamma is such a complex term that it is not really easy to understand this word properly, you need to spend some time, some reflection, and you need to understand the context. Context is very, very important, because sometimes Dhamma means law of nature, sometimes it means just some ethical principles, right? Sometimes it means doctrine, right? And sometimes Dhamma also means phenomena. So, and for example, sometimes it refers to thoughts as well. When you talk about Dhammanupassana, right? Or when you talk about 6 different types of consciousness, and the contents of the Manovijnana is thoughts, Dhamma, right? But what does it exactly mean in the Abhidhamma philosophy? That should be the topic of our discussion. The course will introduce students to the teachings of the Abhidhamma on levels of reality and degrees of truth. So this is also another important point of discussion here, because when you talk about reality and truth, Buddhism is all about trying to explain what is the true nature of existence. What is the real nature of existence? What exactly is reality? Because we are living in samsara with, so much of dispositions, samskara, right? So in a conventional world, full of ideas, right? And this is not just from this life itself. In the samsaric journey, throughout many lifetimes, we have been accumulating these ideas and so on. So what happened is that every individual has his or her own way of knowing life. So his or her own truth, right? So what Buddhism tries to tell us is to find out a kind of a common ground. What exactly is reality? What is truth? Because sometimes this samsaric world is defined as Maya, illusion, like a dream, right? So it feels like we are in a dream world. What would happen when you woke up? So that is why, for example, when Siddhartha Gautama attained enlightenment, it is called Bodhi, awakening. He had awakened to the truth, to reality. And one of the phrases that describe his understanding of the reality of nature is Yatha Bhuta Jnana Darsana, right? Seeing things as they are, as they really are. And those of you who have been, studying this Pali, reading Pali, right? Pali prescribed reading. We have been discussing about this Yatha Bhuta Jnana Darsana, seeing things as they are in terms of causality, right? In terms of causality, cause and effects. So there will be a discussion of different degrees of truth. Basically, in Buddhism, there is a discussion of conventional truth and ultimate truth, right? Sammuti Satcha and Paramatta Satcha. But then again, when you closely look at this description of Paramatta Satcha, you would find that when this Paramatta Satcha becomes, in a way, Sammuti Satcha, when you compare this or try to understand it in relation to one's experience of Nibbana. Because in the Abhidhamma, the reality is presented in terms of 4 types of Dhammas, or 4 categories: Chitta, Chetasika, Rupa, and Nibbana. So while all this classification, analysis, all are put together in the discussion of Paramatta Satcha, you would find There's 4 types of reality, again classified in terms of Sankata and Asankata Dhamma, right? Conditioned and unconditioned. So the Nibbana is presented as unconditioned. The other 3 are presented as conditioned. So which means that all these conditioned Dhammas again fall in the category of Sammuti Satcha, right? Even the term Nibbana could be understood in terms of Sammuti Satcha only. It is a name given to a particular state of experience, probably, right? Because once you realize it, you do not need a name because you do not exist, right? So all this becomes, like a Maya and illusion in the samsara. So it is just going beyond samsara. It is a state beyond samsara. That is what it is. Okay. And it is described in the sense of negating mostly. What is Nibbana? In simple term, Nibbana is not samsara. So whatever you have been experiencing, whatever we have been experiencing in the samsara cannot be found in Nibbana. It is just absolutely, opposite of samsara. That is why you would find description like, lobakayo, dosakayo, mohakayoti, Nibbana. So in the samsara, loba, dosa, and moha have been functioning, right? Great hatred and delusion. Nibbana is a state where you do not have this. In the samsara, you have this concept of I and you. Nibbana is a state where you do not have this. In samsara, you have words, expressions, conventions. Nibbana is a state which is beyond all this. Okay. Analysis of mind and matter. So they are interconnected actually, because, and this is very important because the central topic of Buddhism is this analysis of mind and matter. And the interesting point is that you try to understand and analyze your own mind and matter, not the mind and matter of others or external world. Okay, the focus should be inward, trying to understand how your mind and your matter is functioning. Your 5 aggregates are functioning, understanding the true nature of your own 5 aggregates. Theory of origination. This comes in the description, in the discussion of causation. Instantaneous being. Instantaneous beings refer to those beings arising in the heavenly abodes, Rupa Loka or Arupa Loka, those beings that arise, suddenly, that do not need parents or any other kind of process, right? And conditioned relations, conditional relations. So conditional relations is a subject matter of specifically the 7th book of Abhidhamma Pitaka, that is Patana. The course will be concluded with an introduction to the expository methodology of the Abhidhamma. So even though this last statement says that the course will be concluded with an introduction to the expository methodology of the Abhidhamma, but in the first few lectures we will be discussing about the methodology, okay, not at the end. Okay, so these are tentative topics of discussion. Today we will try to understand Abhidhamma as a literature and how it came to be, origin and development of this class of literature. Then we'll try to follow up our discussions with these topics like Dhamma in Abhidhamma, that is focusing on the Dhamma theory, and then the methodological considerations. Twofold truth could be understood as a kind of method, right? Conventionally, how you should see things, and in the ultimate reality, how you should see things. And then the twofold method. Some of you are, I think, familiar with this twofold method of analysis and synthesis. A general overview of the Abhidhamma teachings, the 4 realities, We will try to have a general understanding of these four realities, and then we will try to focus on each of them. Chitta, for example, and we will focus on its definition, characteristics, and classification. Chaitasika, its definition, characteristics, and classification. We will try to understand the cognitive process as it is discussed in the Theravada Abhidhamma. We will try to have an understanding of matter, rupa, and how it is presented in the Abhidhamma literature. And from the Abhidhammic point of view, we will try to understand the concept of time and space, and then conditional relations. And if we have enough time, we'll try to discuss this topic as well, practical aspects of Abhidhamma, and then presentations by all of you, and then review, then final examination, then end of the semester. So these are the text you are supposed to have. Now, two texts primarily I will be focusing on, because of course there are a lot of text. I mean, you can look at the original text as well, but it will take longer time to go through them. Whenever you have time, you can look at them out of your own interest. This text is very, very important. If you can see this, and if you can read here, Bhikkhu Bodhi, General Editor, 1993. This is published in a different year, I guess. A comprehensive manual of Abhidhamma, the Abhidhammatta Sangha. Okay, so these represent a kind of a summary presentation of the entire Abhidhamma Pitaka. So this could be taken as an introduction to the Theravada Abhidhamma, right? This is produced around 12th or 13th century, Common Era, okay, in Pali. This is actually a very short text, but here the commentarial exposition is also included. Okay, so this is the main text of our class, a comprehensive manual of Abhidhamma. It can be found in the internet, freely available. So you can have this text as a textbook for this course. And number two, Chatta Sangayana Tipitaka, that is from Vipassana Research Institute. From the internet again, you can find this Chatta Sangayana Tipitaka software. If you can download it and install into your computer, you would find the entire Tipitaka commentaries and everything together, right? And you would have the Pali version of this text available. And the third text is by Professor Karunadasa, the Theravada Abhidhamma. So this is the text. This could be taken as a kind of, how do you say, supplementary to our main text. This is in a way arranged in a similar manner as this text. But if you read this text alone, some of the points would remain unclear. So if you read it together, it would be clearer. But if you just take up this book and read alone also, you would find a lot of difficulties without this one. Okay, because if you are familiar with Professor Karunadasa's writing, everything he writes, everything he explained, he always tries to explain from philosophical perspective. So his writing is very concise, to the point, okay, and you need to have a good, vocabulary in English to understand his writing, and you have to be extremely mindful when you are reading his book, because every sentence matters. Okay, every sentence leads to the next sentence and the next paragraph, and this is Abhidhamma, so even more difficult to understand. So he has basically 2 or 3 books, 2 very important books. One is Early Buddhism, that is also discussed from the, how do you say, philosophy from the standpoint of middle teaching. Okay, so in that book he dealt with, for example, the middle position. What is the middle position? Sasvatavada and Uchetavada and the middle teaching. And then he dealt with topics like impermanence, theory of karma, magga, happiness. These are important topics. And this is on Abhidhamma. He discusses all the important, topics of Abhidhamma. He also has another book, part of which is included here, that is the analysis of matter. Analysis of matter. That was his PhD thesis, actually later on published as a book. Okay, and he had another small booklet on Dhamma Theory that is also included in this book. So basically he has actually these two books only. So these are the three, actually two books that you have to look at, because this Chatta Sanghaine edition represents just the Pali version of the Abhidhammata Sangaha. And of course, if you want to have better understanding of Theravada Abhidhamma, I have provided you a list of other texts, okay, by different authors. There is one text by Professor Dhammajyoti on Sarvastivada Abhidhamma, which is not really connected to Theravada Abhidhamma. But if you look at the Pali literature, you would find that there are basically two sets of Abhidhamma literature that came down to us until now. One is Theravada Abhidhamma literature and the other is Sarvastivada Abhidhamma. In the Sarvastivada tradition, also they have 7 texts, right? I just put it here in case you are interested in other kind of Abhidhamma literature. Okay, so you can have a reference point. So what I have done here is that I have provided you references to all the 7 books as well. Okay, translation of all the 7 books. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about assessment of learning. 10% of the total marks is for class participation. So now that you are in 3rd and 4th year, you should be aware of this class participation, what it means by class participation. Okay, it is not just coming to class and sitting down quietly. Okay, so it means that you have to have some ideas and you have to share your thoughts. So the class is open for everyone. If you have some opinions, you can share to all your other friends. Okay, Buntan? Yes. And then class reports and discussions. Normally, you are supposed to have a midterm test, right? Now, because of these issues with, online students, class students, is it my, can you all, the online students can hear me clearly or not? What does it mean?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Yes, teacher.
Okay, very good. So, yes, class reports and discussions, right? So, as I said, you have to participate, you have to engage in the class. For several reasons. One of the reasons is that we have some students joining online and some of you are here. So it is really troublesome to arrange all these midterm tests and everything. But since you are participating in the class, if you join in the discussion, it would be easier. Plus, class report. Class report here, what I mean by this is that you do not, of course, have to submit the report every week, but I would try to, send you some documents, or I would ask you time to time to write some reports, not so much, probably just 1 page or half a page, or 1 page, probably based on what we discussed in a previous lecture, what you understand, right? Or probably sometimes I would send you some documents, or as I said, we are focusing on this particular text, 2 texts. Probably I'll just, ask you that, you read this chapter or this page to that page and write a summary. That way, you would be familiar with the teaching as well as, these books, and you would have this practice of writing as well. Because if you do not do it from the beginning, by the end of the semester, some of you might have some problem, you see, and then it will be very difficult to complete your course. And then a final essay of about 1500 to 2000 words plus presentation. So together 30% of the total marks. So it is not a big essay. You have the experience of writing longer essays, I know. So you do not have to write too long essay, right? Just about 1500 to 2000 words. How many pages, Buddha? He said if you write 1500 to 2000 words, how many pages you will have to write? That is if you put the writings into double space, right? If you keep it normal, maybe 4 pages, right? Right? Okay, if you are confused about writing style and so on, I provide you a specific instruction, font size, spacing, and everything, every detail, so that you are not confused. Okay. And what about the topics? As far as I know, 23 or 24 of you are joining this class, right? And from my previous experiences, I know that most of the time, many of you tend to write on a very similar topics, right? So if you write on a similar topics and then you come for a presentation, everybody would be speaking on just a few topics, right? And after sometimes it gets boring. We hear so many people speaking on the same thing, right? So I would provide you the topic. For all the 23 or 4 of you, I would provide you a separate topic so that you do not have to worry. But you can choose in a way that you can choose number only. I will list them down. Okay. So if you like number 5, I see what is the topic I wrote in the list, number 5, and that would be your topic. Okay. But all the topics are related to our course, not outside of our discussion. And then when you write, you have to read. What are you going to read? So again, what I noticed is that the easy way that most of you follow is to look for the information in the internet. So this time you are not going to have that liberty. You have just these 2 books, okay, that I mentioned. no need to go to library. You can have this two soft copies of these two books. I will send you link where you can find these two PDF copies of these two books. Two reference text and one topic, write 1500 to 2000 words. Okay, so that you do not have to worry about where to find information, which book to read, discuss with who. Life becomes a lot easier, right? Barbara? Okay. And final examination 30%, and it is going to be take-home exam. So you would have 24 hours time. Okay. And don't worry about all this exam and everything. Just focus on the lectures. Try to read these books. Try to write summaries. Participate in the class discussion. Everything will be just fine. I don't understand this writing. Class report.
I want to ask how to do for the class report. Is it wrong sentence?
Class
Yes.
report. Time to time, I would send you some documents, or I would ask you to read part of the text, the main text for our class, and then you have to read through them, make your notes, and then write the report, which would be minimum 1 page, maximum 2 pages, not more than that. And when you write these reports, you do not have to put footnote, reference. No, it is informal writing, what you understand from your reading. Is it clear, or is there any other question?
Yes, it's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other question from the class? The topics, maybe next class I'll provide you as soon as possible, so that you have long time to forget. Long time to think.
You mean the topic for the final essay?
No, the topic for writing the essay.
So we're getting that next week.
Yes, next week I will be providing the topics.
Okay, thank you, teacher. That'll be nice.
Yeah. Any other question from this side? No?
One more, teacher. When will we be doing the presentations?
The presentation by the end of the semester, that is probably in March, end of March, or second half of March.
And it's going to be something the same topic with our final essay.
Yes, that's
Okay,
right.
thank you. Good to know,
Yeah.
teacher.
Yes, so the presentation would be on the topic of your essay. So you would write essay on the same topic and you would make a presentation. Yeah. So you all have a good idea of writing essays, right? So there is no problem. As far as I know, you are having good guidance with regard to writing essays. and even providing these answer scripts. I need to. Yes, so yeah, since you are going to have just this 2 tests, I think it should not be a problem. Okay, so yeah, but I want to say one thing here, because now you are in 3rd and 4th year of your BA studies. You are supposed to have enough experiences of writing. So if you remember, normally what I say is that just try to focus on writing one simple paragraph very well. Work on your one paragraph, first paragraph. If you are able to write your first paragraph, you'll be able to write your entire essay. Okay, what you have to do is that you have to understand your weaknesses, your limitations. So the information that I get from even from other teachers as well is that you are having a certain weaknesses, but you need to understand it and you need to be able to overcome it. Of course, you are not going to be able to do it, overnight, right? So what you have to do is, first of all, you have to read a lot, okay? And you have to see how other people are writing. So that is something that you do not normally do. That is the problem. You read very little. That is the problem. Even outside of your, courses, whatever books or text you get, according to your interest, you can just, read through other people's writing. That is something that you have to keep in mind. And when you write, what you are writing as a writer, you have to look at the writing again as a reader. Okay. So of course, it is a long process. Sometimes you are, what I noticed is that sometimes you do not put so much time from the beginning, and then when you need to submit an essay, you just want to complete it within few days. Then what you do is, a lot of times you need to copy, or when you write, you make a lot of mistakes. And the time is running out, so you have to submit it quickly. And then, with all these mistakes, you submit the essay. That is why some of the teachers do not like it, you see. Especially Dr. Mathia, I understand his viewpoint because I saw him in Mahidol as well. See, in Mahidol, it took more than 8 or 9 years to produce just one graduate. So many students, quit. So many. They never, they are not allowing anyone to pass. But now you see, so many graduates, and everyone is talking about their graduates in Mahidol. So in the beginning, if teachers are saying this, you have to pay close attention to that. You have to be careful from the beginning. It is not that it is impossible. It is just that, you have to just try a little harder, and also, how do you say? You have to convince yourself that I can do it. Let's see. Okay. So I understand his viewpoint because I have sometimes, discussion with him, and sometimes I talk about some of you as well, that maybe not very, some of the students are not very good in English or in thinking and so on. But he says that no, we cannot, be reluctant. We have to force them to this level, then only they will develop. So that is his idea. I know it is sometimes very, difficult for some of you to follow. But his idea is that you are in academic institution, you see, so you have to be aware of all these circumstances. It is like if you say that, okay, for BA course, BA program, 4-year program, 8 semesters, every semester there are 5 courses. If you just come and say that I would follow 3 courses only, and then I want to finish it in 3 years, it is not going to happen. You have to follow the system, right? So yeah, so that much I have to say, and I think you'll be able to write your good essays. You have sufficient time. Okay. Okay, so okay, one more thing I want to discuss today is normally here, if we start our class 8 o'clock, becomes a bit of a hurry, right? And after 1.5 hours, you have 30 minutes of break. So how do you take it? I mean, if you want to start at 8:30, then we are going to have just 10 minutes of break. Is that okay for you? Or we will start at 8 o'clock? That would be good, right? Yeah, because you have to finish all your duties and everything. Yeah. So that is the agreement. How many of you want to have 8 o'clock? Raise your hand. 8 o'clock. And how many of you want 8:30? But then you are going to have just 10 minutes break.
But is the class going to be finished at 11 the same time? When is 8:30?
Sorry?
Is the class going to be finished at, as usual, at 11?
11, yeah.
It started at 8:30.
At 11 o'clock, the class
Okay.
will be completed.
Then it should be fine with us in Myanmar too.
Or, we can even start 8:20 because you are going to have 10 minutes break, right? Instead of 30 minutes, right? It's okay. There is 10 minutes of difference. So 8:20 is the final time, right? Okay. So from next week onwards, we are going to have class from 8:20, and in between you are going to have 10 minutes break, and we would finish our class at 11 a.m. Okay, let's continue with the lecture. Yeah. So we are going to discuss about Abhidhamma literature in general, origin and development, how this body of Abhidhamma literature came to be, right? So as I have been discussing that this is a general idea that Abhidhamma literature came to be developed later than the other two set of text, right? General remarks, Abhidhamma as a Pitaka was developed probably after the second council and completed during the third council. But it is believed that Buddha himself taught Abhidhamma to his mother in the Tavatimsa heaven and to his selected disciples. And in the first council, it has been discussed with the Dhamma Vinaya, but of course, not in the form that is present today. Okay, so this is a general idea. Now, because in the third council, according to the chronicles, Buddhist chronicles, Mahavamsa and Dipavamsa, we come to know that by the time of third council, in the third council, all these three Pitakas have been recited. Abhidhamma Pitaka especially was said to be completed with the inclusion of Katavatopakarana by Mugaliputta Tisatera. So that is specifically mentioned. So therefore, the idea is that if the Abhidhamma Pitaka has been completed in the time of third council, that means the process of its composition started earlier, right? So therefore, the idea is that after the second council, probably the composition of the Abhidhamma Pitaka has started and it was completed by the time of third council. Okay, because if you look at the description of second council, you do not have the mentioning of the recitation of Abhidhamma Pitaka at that time, right? And the general idea is that the Buddha did not teach this Abhidhamma in the human world, right? He went up above the world, and in the heaven, he preached this Abhidhamma doctrine to his mother and also the other heavenly beings, devas. But after coming down from the heaven, he shared some of his Abhidhamma teachings to Venerable Sariputta, right? So Sariputta is said to be one of the finest disciples of the Buddha, supreme in wisdom, right? So in many texts, you find that when describing about Venerable Sariputta, it is said that his knowledge and his wisdom is just second to the Buddha. Okay, so the Buddha chose him to share his Abhidhamma knowledge, and later on, Venerable Sariputta shared his understanding of Abhidhamma to his disciples, and that is how this Abhidhamma teaching continued to exist. So that is one of the idea. But there is also an idea that in the first council itself, there was a discussion of Abhidhamma, which was included in the recitation of Dhamma and Vinaya, but not in the form that we have them now as 7 books, probably in a different form. So normally the idea is that in a Matika form. Matika means index or topics, right? Matrix form. And if you look at the presentation of suttas, in some of the suttas, you would find teachings of the Buddha is presented in a topic form. So some of the characteristics that are present in the Abhidhamma literature can be found in the Sutta Pitaka as well, right? Especially in the Sutta Pitaka. So based on that, there is this idea that probably it was recited in the first council as well, in a Matika form. So this is Mahavamsa. And in the Mahavamsa, especially when it is discussing about the third council, there is this mentioning of Tipitaka, the word Tipitaka, representing this Tripitakas, right? So it says Thero Aneka Sangkamha Bhikkhu Sangha Visarade Chalabinye Tipitake Pahinna Pati Sambide Bhikkhu Sahasang Uchini Katum Sadhamma Sangaham Tehi Asokaramam Hi Aka Sadhamma Sangaham Mahakassapa Terocha Yasa Terocha Karayum Yatha Te Dhamma Sangiting Tissa Tero Pitang Katha Katavatu Pakaranang Paravada Pamadhanang Ahase Tissa Terocha Tasming Sangiti Mandale. So a lot of Theras, Bhikkhu Sanghas gathered together in the time of third council. Some of them were possessed with Chalabinya, 6 higher knowledges, okay? And then they have all recited Tipitaka. Tipitaka has been recited, and it was made complete with the composition of Katavattu Pakarana by Mahakassapa Thera. And this Katavattu Pakarana represent the unique viewpoints of Vivajjavada school, that is later on came to be known as Theravada school, right? As opposed to other schools, other Buddhist and non-Buddhist schools that were present at that time, that have been challenging some of the views of, you can say Theravada or Theravada school. And there is this expression that is present in the Buddhist literature that is called Matika Dhara. Now, if you look at the Bhanaka tradition, when you talk about how all this text came down up until now, especially until they are writing down in the 1st century in Sri Lanka, right? There have been a different group of monks who have been memorizing and teaching this text to their students, right? So if you look at this course outline, the first text, I guess it is by Adhikaram, early Buddhist literature or something, right? So I would suggest that if you want to understand this Bhanaka tradition, look at this book. There is a chapter on this Bhanaka tradition. Okay, it is a very well-informed information writing that is contained there in the text. Now there have been Majjhima Bhanaka, Digha Bhanaka, right? Even for specific text, for example, Jataka, Bhanaka, those who have been remembering the Jatakas, and those who have been remembering Vinayas. Okay, so this Bhanaka means the people who have been memorizing this text, reciting every now and then teaching them to their own students. But there is also the discussion that says that when it says that somebody is studying or remembering text from a particular Nikaya, for example, if they are Majjhima Bhanaka, it does not just mean that they remember only the text belonging to Majjhima Nikaya. They had the opportunity to study other texts as well. So therefore, there were some people, it is said that they were expert in not just one body of literature, different Nikayas. or even different pitakas. I came to know later on, for example, when especially the academic study of Buddhism started, when in early 19th century in the European world, with all these people, Rhys Davids, Oldenburg, and then even Max Muller, all these Western people, when they came to East, they went to Sri Lanka, Myanmar, so many different places, and they are trying to understand this teaching of the Buddha in this particular language, preserved in this particular language called Pali. So when they have started to recognize this language and this body of literature, they found that, of course, probably in a manuscript, there were, this text have been, written down, inscribed in these manuscripts, but they found a lot of monks who can remember a lot of this text. So, for example, in a particular paper, I read that I think it is in the case of a Sri Lankan monk who could remember a few texts that these people, they cannot find in a written form. So what they did is they recorded, the voice of this monk when he's reciting the text, and then later on from the record they typed down and produced as a text. And I also heard that even in Myanmar, for example, there have been a lot of monks who can really remember even entire Tipitaka. See, even today also, right? Yeah. In Thailand, for example, there is this traditional teaching system up to grade 9, from grade 1 up to grade 9. If you look at their syllabus, their curriculum, you'd find that especially as you progress, you have to do a lot of memorization also of text. So this was a practice in a traditional Buddhist learning system in all these traditional countries. Yes. So, yeah, what I'm saying is that there have been people who can really remember and memorize. And nowadays, for example, one may think that how is it possible, right? From my own experience, I can say that, for example, when I was ordained as a young novice monk, long time back, we had to memorize a lot of suttas, not text exactly, right? Suttas, and the kind of text, the suttas that I remembered that time, I memorized. I still can remember them. So you just have to be in the right condition. That's all. Okay, and you have to go through the right kind of practice. So it is possible. So there are some scholars and some people who doubt this process of oral transmission, that these people, this group of people, they have been memorizing all this collection of text and then teaching them to their students, and then they have been remembering it and then teaching them to their students. That is how, especially for 500 to 600 years, this text have been transmitted until they have been written down for the first time in the Aloka Vihara in Sri Lanka. Okay, and what is the reason for writing down this text? The reason was that the country at that time was facing severe difficulties in terms of natural calamities. So there was shortage of food, right? There were a lot of chaos that is going on, and many people, many monks, many learned monks have been passing away because of this problem. Then the king decided that, before we lose all these monks due to this calamity, we need to gather together and write down the Buddha's teaching, the Tipitaka. So that is the reason why they wanted to write it down. That is in the 1st century Common Era. And after that, in the 5th century, when Acharya Buddhaghosa comes to Sri Lanka, right, he edits and rewrite the entire set of canonical and commentarial literature. Of course, I think he did not do it alone. It is not possible for one person to do. Probably he led the group, right? So, and then later on, they have gone through a lot of writing and rewriting, copying and recopying until now, until we have printed copy. Now, you do not need a printed copy, you have soft copy. Easily available in your computer, the entire set of Tipitaka, right? But actually, and that is why it is important to know the history, how they have been preserved. Okay, then only you can value them. For example, this Professor Andu, I think some of you are familiar with him. When he was sharing his understanding about research, he says that 4 to 6 years he has been just spending his time in the library, going through all this, Tipitaka and commentarial text and making his notes when he was doing his PhD. And now he says that it is very easy that you have the entire set of Tipitaka in your computer. You search a particular expression or words or phrases, it all comes to one place. You can see them very quickly. So research became much more easier. See? So this is to say that there have been people who have been expert in this particular set of teachings. Matika Dara here represent, it appears with Dhamma Dara and Vinaya Dara. They represent particularly that there were people who have been expert in this particular field as well. Matika generally means summary or a list of topics used to refer to the summary or of Patimukha rules and to refer to topics found in the Padisambhida Magga and in most of the Abhidhamma text. Amyan, can you give this to Rahula? Yeah. The Mahavichedani is a commentary upon the Matikas of all 7 Abhidhamma texts. So what it says is that if you talk about the Abhidhamma literature, you have to know about this expression Matika, which means summary or list. So it means that before its fuller and complete development, the Abhidhamma Pitaka has been existing in terms of list of topics. As a term, Abhidhamma is found in the Sutta Pitaka and the Vinaya Pitaka to mean regarding the Dhamma. You have the word appearing in the Sutta Pitaka and Vinaya Pitaka, right? So, Abhidhamma, Abhivinaya. Regarding the Dhamma, regarding the Vinaya. So there, the expression is not used to refer to the 7 texts as Abhidhamma Pitaka. Acharya Buddhaghosa says, the textual order of Abhidhamma originated with Sariputta, and he is said to have done this to learn, remember, study, and teach the Abhidhamma. Now for this, I would suggest you to look at this, Dhamma Sangani Attakatha, okay. You can look at this, the beginning section where it is discussed by Acharya Buddhaghosa that if you talk about the 7 text, names of the 7 text that represent 7 different ways of presenting Abhidhamma topics, right? Yes, yes. Yeah, what is the title of the text? The Expositor, Attasalini, Commentary on the Dhamma Sangani by Buddhaghosa. Yes. The Expositor. Okay, if you do not have it, I would send it to you. Yeah. The order is Dhamma Sangani, Vibhanga, Dhatu Kata, Puddala Payati, Katavattu, Yamaka, Patthana. Right? Now, some questions, you may have a certain questions here. Does it mean that Sariputta is the first Abhidhammika? So Abhidhammikas are the people who are expert in Abhidhamma, right? Here we are talking about the origin and development of Abhidhamma Pitaka or Abhidhamma teaching, right? So if you talk about this 7 text coming, of this 7 text as a separate collection, even the names, according to Acharya Buddhaghosa, has been originated with Sariputta. So that means it is the Venerable Sariputta who has provided these names and probably the matikas for this text. That is the idea. So the question is, does it mean that Sariputta can be considered as the first Abhidhammika? What about Katavattu? Because from the chronicles, we come to know that Katavattu came to exist only in the 3rd council, in the time of 3rd council. So the question is, did Sariputta say anything about Katavattu then? What exactly is the story or history of the origin and development of Abhidhamma? So these are some of the questions to reflect on. Now there could be basically 2 approaches to understand this origin and development of Abhidhamma. One is traditional, the other is historical, and you can say in a more academic form, right? So academicians come up with this historical development, while the traditional account is already present in the tradition, right? Now, first of all, let's look at the traditional account. The Sabbanyo Buddha, out of immeasurable compassion, went to the Tavatimsa heaven to preach Abhidhamma. Sitting on Pandukambala under the Parichattaka tree, he preached Abhidhamma to the gods headed by his mother. So this is a traditional understanding that Buddha went to heaven to teach Abhidhamma, right? He shared concisely his teaching on Abhidhamma to one of his chief disciples, Sariputta, around the Anuttatta lake in the Himalayas. Sariputta in turn taught the same teaching to his disciples, and thus the line of disciples learned, remembered, and transmitted the teaching. That is the traditional understanding of how Abhidhamma originated. Thus, Ananda was said to be responsible for reciting it together with the Dhamma at the first council. In the first council, it was recited. Of course, Dhamma has been recited by Ananda and Vinaya has been recited by Upali. So, in a Matika form, Ananda recited Abhidhamma as well in the first council. That is the idea. What was recited together in the first council had come down to Mahinda, who learned and later brought them to Ceylon. After the third council, when Emperor Asoka was sending missionary monks to different parts of the world to propagate the Dhamma, Mahinda Thera, together with some other monks, came to Sri Lanka, and says that he learned all this Tipitaka and commentaries and everything and brought them together with him to Sri Lanka. The teachings were preserved in the Ceylonese scripts. So before Acharya Buddhaghosa came to Sri Lanka, they have been already, ascribed. Acharya Buddhaghosa put them in Pali or Magadhi language on palmyra leaf. So that is how you have this Abhidhamma Pitaka. Okay, I think probably it is better to have a break now for some times. The break, and then we meet again after the break. Okay, let us resume the class. So I just sent you this document from Salini for all of you to look at. So if you want to know in detail the commentarial understanding of the origin and development of Abhidhamma Pitaka, you can look at this document. Okay, I have already sent to you the document just now. So far we have been discussing about the traditional understanding of the origin and development of Abhidhamma teaching and Abhidhamma Pitaka. So this picture here represents the coming of Mahinda Thera with his group of monks to Sri Lanka. And this is probably a king, Devanampiatissa, somebody, any Sri Lankan monk here to confirm? No. Okay. Seems to be meeting these venerables and listening to the teaching. Yeah. Let us spend some time in understanding this expression Abhidhamma. As far as I know, this Abhidhamma Pitaka is widely studied specifically in Burma, right? So that is my understanding, because I have seen that a lot of not just monks, even the lay people, they have really good understanding of Abhidhamma Pitaka. And much more. Okay now? Yeah. So that is my understanding so far. So it should not be a problem for all of you. I guess it is really interesting because in most cases I came to understand that this Abhidhamma Pitaka seems to be very difficult to comprehend, right? even for myself, sometimes I think that probably if I was born in Myanmar, I would have, early access to Abhidhamma teaching. That would be good for me as well. But yeah, normally it appeared to be a bit difficult compared to the teaching in the Vinaya Pitaka and Sutta Pitaka. But then, of course, if you pay a little close attention, it becomes okay. Because, sometimes what happens is that even in our general communication, somebody says something to you and then you understand it in your own perspective, with your own perspective. That's all. Okay. So it is not really easy to communicate a message from one person to another in a conventional level. So the other day, for example, I was just sitting and thinking about it. I was just thinking that the way I see the world, the way I experience everything in the world, is it the same with other people, that they also see and experience the same thing? And I quickly, realized that it is really not so. Everybody, has a different experience in the world. Everybody looks at things differently. Everyone, every single person. Okay, so when we take the help of these words and expressions in communicating our ideas, it is never fully communicated. Probably I am thinking of something and then I am speaking about it. You do not see my thoughts, you just hear my words and you fit them into your mental framework. In the case of even, day-to-day conversation, forget about these teachings. Why I'm saying this is because when you distinguish between the teaching in the Abhidhamma Pitaka and Sutta Pitaka and so on, in the Sutta Pitaka, if you read a sutta and you get to know that the Buddha said that, everything is impermanent. All conditioned existence is impermanent. Sabbe sankhara anicca. That is the statement. And you feel like, oh, I see, I understand what the Buddha means. And then when you come to Abhidhamma explanation of the same thing, impermanent, which is explained in terms of momentary existence, how things change every moment, and there are mind moment, there are matter moment, right? And how you really actually cannot grasp the reality because the change is so fast. So there is a meticulous presentation of this momentary existence. So in a way, it is talking about the same thing. Sabbe sankhara anicca. In the sutta, you would find it as an expression, a phrase, popular phrase. And then quickly you think that, oh, I understand, everything is impermanent. From childhood, you grow older and then older and older until you become very old. So that is what it is. But no, in the Abhidhamma, it just provides you minute detail about the change. So in terms of change, in terms of impermanence, anicca, both are talking about the same thing. The approach is different. Why one presentation seems to be easier and one presentation seems to be difficult? Because in the sutta, you just get the general understanding of it. But in the Abhidhamma, you have to keep in mind that they are not just philosophers thinking about this reality of existence. They are practitioners as well. They see things as they are, how the change taking place. and then they try to come up with the explanation for the common people so that they can have a glimpse of understanding, right? But even then, as I said, words are words. It depends on how you understand them, how you take them, right? So if you think in that line, you would find that Sutta and Abhidhamma, Sutta Pitaka and Abhidhamma Pitaka, actually they are talking about the same thing, following different methods of presentation. Then you would find, I think, probably some encouragement to understand the Abhidhamma teaching in a better way. But if you think that, the two are completely different, it is easier to understand suttas and difficult to understand Abhidhammas, then it would be more difficult. Let's look at this word Abhi with Dhamma, right? Tata kena tena Abhidhammo, it says Dhamma tireka, Dhamma visesatena Abhidhamma, right? That which exceeds and distinguished from the Dhamma, namely the suttas. The teaching may be same, the presentation is different. How different? Abhi in the sense of ati, as preponderance or distinction. For example, dukkha vedana abhikamati, painful feeling, overwhelm. So you have painful feeling, too much of painful feeling, overwhelmingly painful. Abhikanta vanna, eminent beauty. Vanna or beauty, color, complexion, which is eminent, supreme. Atichatang, preeminent, sunshade. Atidhaja, preeminent, fleck. Atiraja Kumara, the prince par excellence. Atideva or Abhideva, the peerless God. Ati Brahma, the supreme Brahma. Eva meva ayampi dhammo, dhamma atireka dhamma visesatena abhidhammoti vucchati. This sense, Abhidhamma should be understood in the sense of exceeding and distinguishing from the Dhamma. So in a way, what it says is that it provides further and deeper, fuller, clearer explanation of the Dhamma, meticulous presentation of the Dhamma. Something that normally in a conventional terms, it's not clear. Okay. Among other explanations of Abhidhamma, one is that it brings you face to face with the Dhamma. There is one explanation like that. Even Nibbana, sometimes it says that it brings you closer to Nibbana. It brings you face to face with the Dhamma. That is Abhidhamma. Right? Because the presentation in the Abhidhamma is in terms of ultimate realities. Paramatta Satcha, Paramatta Dhamma. In terms of Chitta, Chetasika, Rupa, and Nibbana. We will come to know about the Dhamma in Abhidhamma when we study the Dhamma Theory from the presentation of Professor Karuna Dasa. There you would find that Dhammas are presented in terms of building blocks of our phenomenal experience. So these Dhammas represent the subtlest aspect of existence, irreducible particles. And in terms of presentation of the teachings in the Abhidhamma, you would find that the way Abhidhamma presentation differs from the presentation of teachings in the suttas is that in the Abhidhamma, you would find Suttanta classification, Abhidhamma classification, and catechism. Basically, these three aspects you can notice. Okay, the subject matter are more or less the same. There is a discussion of aggregates, there is a discussion of ayatanas, there is a discussion of dhatus, such as, right, controlling faculties, indriyas, nidanas, satipatthana, virya, bojjhanga, magga, jhana, right? Even 5 precepts, kilesa, cosmology or loka. All these topics appear in the discussion in the Abhidhamma. So there is Suttanta presentation in some cases where it says that, in the Suttanta, you would find the presentation in this particular way. And then the Abhidhammic classification or Abhidhammic presentation of the same teaching. And then as catechism. Catechism means in terms of question and answer. In terms of question and answer. This we have discussed earlier with the inclusion of Katavattu, the Abhidhamma Pitaka, as 7 books completed in the time of Third Buddhist Council. That is the traditional understanding of how these 7 texts came to exist. So there was a question about Katavattu, right? Because we are talking about Sariputta giving these names of 7 texts. What is your reflection? What is your opinion with regard to this? Any opinion? Anyone wants to make any remark? With regard to the Katavattu, there is this idea that is presented by Acharya Buddhaghosa that, of course, the Buddha did not really discuss about the, Katavattu as an entire text in the time of the Buddha. Neither Venerable Sariputta discussed about it in detail, but it says that the Buddha presented a kind of framework for this Katavattu. So it says the Buddha began with 8-facet inquiry into the theory of the person or soul, Puggala, and laid down the contents. Let's look at. You mean in terms of acceptance of Katavattu in the group of Abhidhamma Pitaka? There is no controversy. There are some discussion with regard to Puggala Panyati. You can find, even though Puggala Panyati is included in the Abhidhamma category of text, there is some questions with regard to that. But with regard to Katavattu, there is not so much of question, because you see, the nature of Abhidhamma is that, in the Abhidhamma, the approach is to define and redefine the teachings of the Buddha. One word that is used to refer to Abhidhamma is scholasticism. It is a philosophical approach. Obviously, Abhidhamma text and Abhidhamma teachings developed later, but based on the teachings in the suttas and vinayas. Right? Now, who are the people who developed these Abhidhammas? They are practitioners as well as thinkers, in the sense that they wanted to present these teachings based on their own experience philosophically, because that was a trend at that time in India. Now you are faced with a lot of questions from other schools, and in the Kathavattu you would find a number of questions proposed by different schools, and Vanava Mugaliputta Tissa Thera, presenting Theravadin viewpoints against these questions. Similar approach you would find in Sarvastivada Abhidhamma as well, right? So, and if you look at the other text, not just in Kathavattu, Dhamma Sangane, Vibhanga, Yamaka, as it is said, catechism is one of the characteristics. Questions are raised, answers are provided. Normally, in a philosophical trend, if you look at even the Western, philosophies, earlier text, there are questions and then there are answers. That is how things are, in a philosophical system, things are developed. So therefore, I think even when the Kathavattu was composed, keeping all these things in mind, it was composed in that way. But why there is question with regard to Puggala Panyate is that in the Puggala Panyate, you have just enumeration of personality types. That's all. In terms of 1, 2, 3, 4 until 11, I think. What is this one person? What is his characteristics? So with single characteristics. And then 2 types of persons, 3 types of persons, 4 types of persons, right? So you do not have further explanations with regard to, Dhamma so much. Similar presentation you would find even in the Anguttara Nikaya. So if you have similar, topics of discussion in the Anguttara Nikaya, why this Puggala Panyate is put in the Abhidhamma Pitaka? Because it is talking about more or less the same thing, right? So therefore, there is a question with regard to this. Some even say that, some scholars say that it does not really actually fit in the, frame of Abhidhamma Pitaka. On the other hand, if you look at text like Patisambhida Magga, Patisambhida Magga has all the characteristics of becoming Abhidhamma text. So some people even say that Patisambhida Magga can be taken as a kind of a predecessor to Abhidhamma Pitaka. Right? But yes, there is not so much of question with regard to Kathavattu because it has all the characteristics of Abhidhamma Pitaka. Mean what? Now, yes, interesting question. The benefit, now it depends. Now we are in academic setting, so we have to look at it from different direction, and we have to have a certain amount of academic exercises, you see. But if you are just a practitioner and you are following a particular master, then you do not ask so much of question. You ask only the necessary questions that is required, because you put all your faith, all your emotions and energy on the teacher, on the teaching, because you have a different goal, right? But in the academic setting, you are supposed to be a bit critical, right? And it also helps. Even in the case of a practice, also you have to be critical to some extent. You have to be critical enough to know yourself and to understand the teaching of the teacher. Then only you can place your faith upon the teaching, upon the teacher, right? The benefit is that I think probably as we go along, you would find that there is not so much of contradiction, just different ways of looking at the same thing, probably, right? In the traditional account, sometimes you do not find so much of logic also, right? You have to have faith, you have to believe, and then you have to take it as it is, and then you focus mostly on the teaching itself. And if you talk about Buddha and Sariputta providing this Abhidhamma, you have extra faith to these teachers. You believe in them. They are realized person. So you take them very seriously, right? But in the case of academic field, for example, the academicians, they try to understand the logical development, how it can come to be. Now, they are looking at the characteristics of Abhidhamma teaching, right? What are the characteristics? What is the language style? What is the style of presentation? And what is the style of presentation and so on in the suttas? What are the specific suttas that have, Abhidhammic characteristics? From this, can you say that, Abhidhamma in a smaller form was present in the time of Buddha or even before Abhidhamma Pitaka came to exist in a full form? What kind of questions they have been discussing in the suttas, and what kind of topics the Abhidhamma text have been discussing, right? Whereas in the case of traditional understanding, you just say that Buddha went to heaven and he taught it to his mother and other gods, and then he came down and he taught to Sariputta, and then from Sariputta everybody got this Abhidhamma teaching. You have to believe it. You do not have any way to prove it. Unless you go to the same heaven and ask some of the gods, is it really true that Buddha came here to teach Abhidhamma to you all? Yeah. Any other? I don't understand. You have to speak louder. Yes, we can say not just the Abhidhamma Pitaka, but there are many suttas that can be considered as commentary. I think most of the suttas even. But the other point that you mentioned, we do not know where Abhidhamma came from is wrong. We know exactly Abhidhamma is developed from the teachings of the Buddha contained within the sutta and so on, because it conforms with these teachings, right? It is just a further explanations, further expositions. Now, when you are questioning about the existence of Abhidhamma, saying that Buddha did not speak Abhidhamma, how, as we have them now, in the same form, the Buddha did not speak Abhidhamma Pitaka, right? You can ask the same questions with regard to suttas as well. look at any sutta, most of the suttas are presentation by Venerable Ananda, right? And this is an experiment that you can do. Take a few suttas. There are different types of suttas, and you try to find out how much of the exposition in the sutta really represent the words of the Buddha. What is the technique? So when Ananda says, then the Buddha said. So those are the quotations. Those are the statements from the Buddha, and that also as reported by Ananda, right? Look at one sutta and try to find out how many statements are spoken by the Buddha. So this sutta has become commentary as well in that sense, right? Now there are other types of suttas that are spoken by the disciples themselves only, and they are explaining the teaching of the Buddha. They are clearly commentary. So these are just classification of different layers of explanation. That's all. You have commentary, and then you have sub-commentary, Attakata, Tika, Anutika, and you have different manuals. This is called a manual. Abhidhamma Sangaha is a manual, right? And what about this? This modern day text, we do not say Attakata, Tika or anything, even though this also represent a kind of Attakata actually, commentarial explanation. We call them secondary literature. Yeah. I don't think so. In what way you are saying that depends. Now, by that, if you mean that, you need to first study Abhidhamma, then only you will be able to realize the realization, the truth. And then I think it is not very much true. But if you are saying that it doesn't matter, you follow suttas or what, or a particular teacher or what, your realization of truth in some way represent Abhidhamic understanding of realities. Then I might agree, because once you have the realization, you have a clearer vision of these realities, Chitta, Chatasika, and everything, right? One does not necessarily study Abhidhamma, to go to practice and realize these truths. But once somebody realizes this, he or she might have clear understanding of these realities. Possibly, but you see, if you talk about Buddhas, there are Samma Sambuddhas and then Pacceka Buddhas. Pacceka Buddhas do not teach. Why they don't teach? Right? And in the time of the Buddha, if you raise this question that, these other monks and the Buddha, why they are not discussing about these Abhidhammas? That is the question, right? Because they are able to teach it because they are a realized person, right? Maybe it was not needed. As I said, this Abhidhamma Pitakas developed in a time when there was a lot of debates and discussions going on. Right? So these masters, Abhidhamma masters, felt the necessity to write it down, because people are understanding the teaching of the Buddha contained in the Sutta and Vinaya Pitaka differently. They are interpreting differently, probably misunderstanding and misinterpreting. in the time of the Buddha and these great arahants, wherever they went, when they are teaching this Dhamma, if you have any question, if the audiences have any question, they can directly ask and clarify it. Isn't it? But it is not so now, or even in the time of King Asoka, or prior to King Asoka. This clock should be that side. Oh, there is one there. I see. Okay. I see. Okay. Any other question from the online students?
I guess not yet.
No,
Maybe
teacher. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Sorry, no question.
Yes, teacher, no question now.
Yeah. So now, because there is a discussion of this impermanence and constant change, okay, continuous change of everything, mind and matter. The question then is how quick that change. What exactly changes, right? So the fundamental unit of mind and matter, is it possible to know? That is the question. And then how do you know it? You analyze the events in the mind and matter, right? For example, if you look at the scientific understanding of physics, matter, they come up with these particles called atom or neutron and so on, right? To the point that they call something as ghost. I mentioned it in other class as well, right? What they are trying to do is they are trying to figure out what is the ultimate basis for the entire world, the entire cosmos. What is the fundamental basis, building blocks based on which everything came to exist? If it is not there, nothing is there. So they are trying to figure out that. Not just that. When you talk about this fundamental basis and the entire creation, that means this basis possesses a certain type of energy. What is this? For example, Albert Einstein came up with this idea of E equal to mc square, right? So he's said to be a very talented person in the field of science, right? Where he equates everything to be actually one, time, space, matter, everything to be just one, representing in different ways. That is the ultimate basis, right? That is what he's saying in theory. Now, in Buddhism, matter is understood to be, for example, in the Abhidhamma analysis, 28 types, right? There are 4 Mahabhutas, great elements, and then 24 secondary elements. That is only the matter. And they are classified and discussed from different perspectives. In terms of grouping, how many different aspects come together and form a one group, kalapa, and so on. What about the mind? What is the aspect of mind? So in the Abhidhamma, we find that mind has two aspects, Chitta and Chaitasika. Chitta seems to be just one, right? It just takes different forms, different shapes, right? Chaitasika, there are many, 52. Yes. But in one particular Chitta moment, there is a coming together or conglomeration of many Chaitasikas, right? Now, this is something that is really not very much explored in the modern science, because mind is understood in modern science in terms of brain functioning, right? So you have a particular moment of experience. How many factors are present in this particular mind moment of your experience, right? And then look at your look at the functioning of your body and mind. In modern science, you will find that every cell of your body is continuously changing. It's not static, it is changing, every bit of it. If it does not change, there is a problem. If it does not change, when you are young, your body doesn't change, you remain young forever. That is good, isn't it? If it does not change, changeability, possibility, potentiality, nothing is possible. Existence is not possible. That is on the physical level. So accordingly, in Buddhism also, it says that this physical reality, every bit of it, changing continuously. In the Theravada Abhidhamma, the ratio provided is that 1 to 17, I think, right? One mind moment equals to 17 matter moments. No, sorry. One matter moment is equal to 16 mind moments. The change of matter seems to be slower compared to the change of mind, according to Theravada Abhidhamma. Now, this seems to be the fundamentals of your existence and your experiences. And it is called phenomenal experiences. Why is that? Because based on your composition, functioning of your mind and matter, your sankharas and everything, you see the world, which is different from how other people see the world. In this particular room, how many of us now? 10, 12 of us are staying. Somebody might have been going through a lot of trouble in the mind, right? And somebody might have been experiencing, exceeding joy. We are living in this exact same environment, right? So reality differs person to person. Okay. So how you experience these things based on your sankharas and your compositions, you just have to figure it out. If you solve that problem, quickly you realize that not just you, everyone, the entire universe is functioning in terms of causality of dharmas. These are called dharmas. When you have that realization, you do not differentiate between you and others or the world. There is no you and others. You just see the dharmas that are, for example, Acharya Buddhaghosa says, Suddha Dhamma Pavatanti. Pure dharmas roll on. Kamasa karako nati vipakasa chavedako. Right? Suddha Dhamma Pavatanti. On the conventional level, we have actors performing action and then receiving the results of the actions. But what he is telling us is that there is no actor behind actions. There is no one who is experiencing result of the actions. There is just the process that is going on. Yes. Anything else? So Abhidhamma is understood to be in terms of having a deeper and clearer understanding of Dhamma, right? That extra, that excessive thing, that unique and best supreme teaching. So that is why it is the Paramattha. It represents the Paramattha teaching. And I said, in some cases, Abhidhamma is defined in terms of coming face to face with the Dhamma, coming face to face with the Nibbana. Because you are coming a closer, you are developing a closer understanding to the truth and reality. That is one explanation. Sometimes you would find Abhidhamma to be defined as higher Dhamma. So higher does not mean that it is higher than the Sutanta teachings. It is not in that sense. Teachings remain the same. The presentation is different. It is more elaborate, more meticulous. Yes. Functioning of dhammas. Yes. Shaun, what is the question? Huh? Come young. No, Punta?
I have a question, but I don't think it's a very good one, but I'll try. If the Buddha himself only taught Abhidhamma in the realm of the devas and not in the human realms, is there maybe a very slight possibility that it's not very suited for the humans?
There is this understanding as well that humans are not able to understand this Abhidharma. Then the question is, how come these humans are becoming arahants and so on if they do not realize the truth? Right? They are really becoming liberated, and then why after a few hundred years later, people have started to study the Abhidharma? Is it that people became more intelligent by then, that they are able to understand it? But yes, there is this idea, but I don't think that is the reason. This is just a traditional presentation. We are not sure if the Buddha exactly taught the Abhidhamma in the heaven or not. This is how we find this information preserved in the tradition. Similar ideas you can find with regard to this early Mahayana text, right? Prajnaparamita Sutra and so on. People are not ready to hear the teaching, so they were preserved in Naga world, right? Dragon world. And then Acharya Nagarjuna went to Naga world, and then they offered this text to him, and he brought it back to this human world. This gives a sense of elevation to the text, a high regard to the text.
Okay, thank you, teacher.
Hello, Bande. I also have a questions about this Abhidhamma. So you said even at the first Buddhist councils, the Venerable Ananda, he presents to his I'm going to say to his presentations include Abhidhamma. So did generally what Buddha taught, he after he taught to the Orient, he re-taught to the Ananda again. So this Abhidhamma, after the Buddha taught in the heaven, so he retaught to the Sariputta. So he did not taught to the Ananda. So after that, did Ananda, can he know by himself, or like, and also did he Sariputta taught to the Ananda again or something?
Yeah, interesting question. So it is true that when Ananda became chief attendant to the Buddha, he made a request to the Buddha that Buddha has to repeat all his teachings to Ananda so that he can remember them. If Ananda is accompanying the Buddha to a certain occasions, he himself hear the teaching. But if sometimes Buddha goes to some places alone where Ananda does not follow him, Buddha has to come back and repeat the same discourse to Ananda so that he can remember it. But why it is not so in the case of Abhidhamma Pitaka? It is really a good question. But one thing, of course, again, I have to mention that this is what we find in the traditional account, that Buddha taught this Abhidhamma in the heaven, and then he told a summary to Sariputta and so on. Now, as I said earlier, this shows that the capability of Sariputta in understanding this deeper teaching, because his wisdom was supreme among the disciples. But in the case of Ananda, he was not yet an arahant, I think, as far as we find in the text. He became an arahant only after Buddha passed away, before the first council, before the starting of first council, right? So I'm not sure, probably he would not be able to grasp the message. But then again, the question is, it says that the matrix of Abhidhamma is contained within the sutta, right? Then the discussion could be probably that, not in a very detailed form, but in a very simpler form. In the suttas, these messages are present, based on which later on Abhidhamma Pitaka developed. But if you are asking me why the Buddha did not share his Abhidhamma teaching to Ananda, I have no idea. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I still have a question, like two questions. One, the Sariputta taught the Abhidhamma to this 500 disciple. So after that, they gained maybe enlightenment, yeah, maybe arahant, and they becomes arahant. So at that time, even the Ananda, he did not arahant. So he just like maybe normal monk or something like that. So it's kind of like the same. And also, another question is, once the monk or other people they becomes arahant. They already know, like already understand all the teachings of the Buddha.
Yeah.
Did they understand the teachings of all the teachings of the Buddha automatically?
Yes. So are these your questions or remark? Your remark. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. As I said, Ananda was not an enlightened person by that time, right? So he was not chosen to talk to, Sariputta was chosen. And as I said, it gives Abhidhamma literature as a kind of higher status that, it is a sphere of intellectuals, it is a sphere of highly developed wisdom and so on, because it came from Buddha to Sariputta, not to Ananda. And now if you look at this Bhanaka tradition as well, you find different teachers and their disciples are given different set of text to memorize and transmit. Ananda is given, I think is it the Digha Nikaya? Probably. So I think Ananda was more interested in the stories, even though he remembered all this text, Dhamma. But you would find different masters, Anuruddha, Ananda, Upali is of course responsible for Vinaya, and Sariputta is responsible for Abhidhamma teaching. Mahakassapa and his disciples preserved Anguttara teachings, I guess, shorter teachings. So we find this kind of division as well. So Ananda was actually busy with so many things. Probably first reason could be that he was not an enlightened. Secondly, he was too much busy with managing everything with the Buddha and everyone. So he was not chosen to, chosen to be a person to teach this Abhidhamma. Probably he was not in a condition to memorize it or remember it or understand it. So we have them in the sutta form in different format. Yes. But apart from Ananda, there were many other disciples who are more or less equally, developed in wisdom, just as Venerable Sariputta. Mahakachana, Punnamantaniputta, all these people are regarded highly because of their wisdom. Yeah. So it is really interesting. I remember in this particular sutta, Ratavinita Sutta of Majjhima Nikaya, there is a discussion between Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Punnamantaniputta. So Venerable Sariputta asked question to Venerable Punnamantaniputta and he answers the questions, right? And by the end of the sutta, it says that, so Sariputta asked Punnamantaniputta, may I know your name? How people regard you. And he says that, I am called by my friends Punnamantaniputta. Then Punnamantaniputta asked Sariputta, may I know your name, please? And then Sariputta says that people call me Sariputta. And then Punnamantaniputta says that, oh, I did not know that I was talking to Venerable Sariputta, whose wisdom is second to only Buddha. If I knew that I was talking to Venerable Sariputta, I would not say so much, right? But then Venerable Sariputta appreciates Punnamanthaniputta's exposition of the teaching. So I remember that some people, when I was discussing these things with our faculty here, for some reason, especially one of the teachers, Professor Charles, actually, he points out that normally what we see is that everybody asks question to Sariputta. But here, we see that Sariputta asking question to Punna. Why is this? This seems to be different. You see? So, what I mean to say is that they have been equally talented, equally wise. This represents an occasion where it seems like Punna Mantaniputta actually did not know about Sariputta. But Sariputta knew that it is Punna Mantaniputta. From the sutta, we understand that. But as a follower of the Buddha, as a practitioners, what they would do is they would engage in certain type of discussions where one person would ask question, the other person would answer. Okay, and the audience, the newly ordained monks, they would listen to the teachings and they would have their understanding of the Dhamma. Similar case you would find with Mahakacchana. So that is also an interesting point, that why the Buddha chose to share his Abhidhamma knowledge with Sariputta, not to other such talented monks. But it is interesting that you are pointing out these questions. I would ask if anyone would like to explore this area and come up with some conclusions and share with the class. Who would like to do that? Venerable Khamar?
Me?
Yeah, do you like to do that?
So, sorry, what? Summary the class.
Why the Buddha chose Sariputta to share his Abhidhamma knowledge, not Ananda or Mahakacchana or Punnamantaniputta?
I don't know, so I ask a question.
It is good. We have to have questions to explore. We have to be doubtful. We have to have questions. If we do not have questions, we do not know.
Yes, I think this Venerable Sariputta is the very high knowledge and than other monks, because he is the right place to be in the Buddha. That is why the Lord Buddha chose to Sariputta to teach Abhidhamma. I think.
Yes. And why he did not choose Ananda?
Ananda is already maybe already here because of, he is the attendant of Buddha. That is why. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Any other person wants to say anything? Interesting, yeah. That is, how do you calculate days and nights? How do you calculate times? You are mixing up a few things actually. First of all, when you talk about time, space, everything, it is functional for this phenomenal world, for us, for me and you. This realized person, they go beyond time and space. So that is a different. And if you are talking about heavens and hells, heavens up there, hells down there, these are just ideas. How do you decide what is up and what is down? Or probably everything is in here. You don't see some beings that are like a spirit, like air. But if you are an enlightened person, probably you see them clearly. They come to visit you, listen to your teaching, right? What we see here is trees, plants, animals, other creatures. And what about the time? Can you say that, of course, we say that, for example, how many years a dog lives? 12 years? That is our counting of 12 years. What about dogs counting? You ask a dog, right? A dog's understanding of the world could be completely different. Maybe we are not humans for them. We are something else, right? That is true. But that we have to understand figuratively, not literally. If you are in bliss, some people would say that, for example, when they are in jhanic experience, they don't even realize when days pass by. So 5-7 days feel like just few hours. Now, is it just few hours or 7 days? For you and me, it is 7 days. So heaven, sukha, happiness in the heaven, and the suffering in the hell should be understood relatively. When you are in pain, every second, appears to be an hour. So from that context, I think you should think about it. That is one reason. His mother, yes. You see, these are, yeah, I know. Yeah, it could be possible. Yeah, so this is a logical conclusion because they are always immersed in happiness. So very easy to forget things, and that is a logical conclusion. So, but as I said again, I mean, what is heaven? Where is heaven? What kind of beings live there? Do they have 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth like us, or not? So it is, in a way, all you can imagine. You can, think about it in that way. But I think the essential thing is we need to understand the message conveyed in the text. Why, it is said that it is taught in heaven. So now, of course, we know that he wanted to help his mother. This is one reason. And where he can find his mother, right? So probably he somehow access to his mother, certain kind of realm, which is called the Thavatimsa heaven. He can call it by any name. It doesn't matter, right? And then generally when you talk about heaven and hells and human world, heavens are put higher beings, right? And sophisticated. So you associate the Abhidhamma teaching with that they are in a position to understand, right? But then, as you said, they might have forgotten also. Probably that is why the Buddha came down and taught it to Sariputta. You see? Yeah. Okay, it seems like none of you have any other question or remark. We can end today's session here, and then we can, continue in the next class with the remaining discussion. And as I said, in the next class, I will be giving you the topics to write your essays. In the meantime, I would decide what to send you or ask you to read and write a summary. But it is very good that you are joining in discussion, raising questions. I would expect that when we start our class next week, you would be presenting your understanding of today's discussion. Or if you have any different views with regard to today's class. Okay. So if you start sharing, it is good you share your knowledge and experience. Other people also learn from that. Right? We'll start with you next week. Okay. Okay, then it is almost lunchtime. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Okay, teacher. See you next week.
Bye-bye.